Hey. Leah, can you hear me? Waiting for everyone else to come in. Can you guys comment so I can see if the comments are working? Want to see what that looks like. Wait 1 minute, I'm trying to fix the comments here. Got 4 of you guys on there. 5. Cool. Can you guys comment to see if I get them? Any luck on the commenting? There you are. Okay, I'm seeing the commenting. Cool. Ah, here we go. Cool. Awesome, guys. Who's on? Cool. Trying to figure out who's on there. You guys have your sound up and everything? Can you guys hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Cool. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna check one more thing because I see that there's 4 or 5 of you guys on here already. I just want to make sure. I want to see if I can check who it is. Hey, there you are. All right, Maya's on. Maya's on. I know Christian's joining in a little while. If you guys aren't logged in, to YouTube, if you don't have an account, I don't think it lets you comment. I think that's what Leo was trying to say. There's Bjorn. Cool. I'll give it another minute or so. I mean, this is, I'm going to do my best to record this. The audio of this is at least going to be recorded. It's being recorded now. How's the audio? Can you guys hear me? Cool. So, hey guys, everybody that's on there. How you guys doing? I miss you guys. I miss all of you guys. Just got back from Korea yesterday and it was kind of crazy, so I'm a little bit jet lagged, so I'm a little bit scattered. Bear with me. Like, these will get better. It's also trying to figure out the best way to do these. I want to do this. Hey Bjorn, I want to figure out the best way to do this. And eventually I do want to have it so we're all on the video chat, or anybody that wants to be on the video chat can put their own video feed on there and make it much more interactive. But I didn't want to take any longer to do one of these with you guys because I think it's so important, like, for us to continue to talk to each other and talk about what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, the new stuff that's working, the stuff that there's a lot of questions on, because the way that we're talking about movement is changing. The big concepts are staying the same, but the way that we talk about them and the refinements of how to put this into people's bodies and through evolution and experimentation, the things that we're discovering about, all right, we were teaching this and now people are going too far in one direction because they're getting really good at fixing the compensations that they had before. And now all of a sudden they're so good at fixing those compensations that they're swinging the other way. So a lot of the stuff, it's funny, especially working with Devin, I laugh about Devin, because Devin's kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember or heard about when they used to, like, coal miners, they used to bring like a little canary into the coal mines, and it was kind of like an alarm system. Like, if the air quality in the mine would go down to a certain level, the canary would be affected first, and then depending on what happened to the canary, they would know it was either time to get out or they needed to do something about the air quality. Devin's kind of like my canary when it comes to our canary when it comes to some of this stuff, because she'll get on something and then she'll do it over and over and over again, and she'll get really good at it to the point that she goes all the way to the other side, and it's like, whoa, wait a second, went too far. And then we kind of look at it and be like, okay, how do we get people more in the middle of what we want to do? So if you have any specific questions, send them over. Christian sent me some really good ones. Send over questions, put them in the comments. We'll figure out a better way to do that too. I wanted to use the computer so I could still have the texting available and WhatsApp available, but that didn't work today. There was something wrong with the camera on the screen, but we'll get that eventually. But send me the questions and we'll start kind of talking about them. Z, are you on there? I'm not sure if Z is on yet, but I kind of feel bad not for Z and Maya and Christian especially, and even Leah. I don't feel that bad for you guys, but you guys are the ones that it's been a little bit longer that I haven't seen you guys, and there's been some things that we're doing that are a little bit different, a little bit more refined and specific compared to what we were doing before. And a few of the things is the way that we talk about standing poses and and the pelvic relationship between the relationship between the pelvis and the rib cage, and trying to come up with more ways that are going to be more down the center, instead of just like this is the one way that you do everything all the time. It's here's the concept of why we do things. Here's the concept of the relationships in the body. So, and then empower as more and more, and adjust the movements as you see fit, because you understand the concepts well, not just because you've memorized the alignment really well. Does that make sense? Some of the weird things, and I'll say weird, but some of the things that we were discussing and talking about it in a different way, it's even stuff like what is neutral? Like, what is pelvic neutral? Is there a difference between a standing neutral and a standing ready neutral? We're talking about what's good alignment in the feet. We're talking more about something as neutral being more of a range instead of one specific spot that we need to hit all the time. Yeah. So any questions about anything before I just kind of like start going over some stuff with you guys? Got 10 seconds. No pressure. No specific questions from any of you guys? You just want me to continue talking? I was stalling a little bit because it's weird, but this will be recorded, so I'll get back to Christian, and we'll keep going with this. So the pinky packet of muscles on. So I know that some of you guys, we've been talking about it a lot, but the idea of the pinky packet of muscles being this place that spins, that we spin from, that's been a big deal. That's been one of the places that we focus so much. And I know that you guys have noticed that that's one of the things that tends to have people most excited about something new that they can do. The way that we've been talking about this, the way that we've been teaching this has been this idea of this cave in the hand, here. Yeah, and having this be the first point, this be the second 2 points, this being the last point that I'm not that specifically focused on whether this touches the ground or not. Hand has to be strong, connecting from the shoulder blade all the way into the hand and keeping that relationship solid. That's been important. And then people were asking me, in Korea, does that mean that this never comes down? No, this can come down. The only thing that we're doing is we're not putting a big focus on pushing this. Some of the things that I did get in Korea, which is some of the older school ideas of why we put more pressure on the inside than the outside. This bone being bigger, this bone being smaller, thinking more of a compression system. And then you would want to put the weight on the bigger structure, which is this bone here. But that's not really the way that force is distributed through the body in a healthy system. You're not actually putting too much weight there. Again, if you can think of the body as just a bunch of rubber bands with sticks called bones being the separator between these rubber bands. So what we're looking to do is not put weight necessarily on the biggest stick. What we're trying to do is balance the rubber bands around the stick, so when we push down, all the tension throughout all of the rubber bands are even, or as even and balanced as we can get them. And what tends to happen in yoga especially is that we overload these rubber bands on the inside. You get shoulder impingements or this rounding forward kind of idea. The feet. The feet, we've basically been keeping them really the same. We've backed off a little bit, again, because we're starting to see that people are doing it really well, of too much of the grabbing of the toes. So the way that we've been doing it, the reason that we put so much weight in the heels, for most people, they're very disconnected from the posterior oblique slings, the superficial back line, the posterior chain, whatever you want to call it. The muscles on the back are usually underdeveloped in most of us and most of the students that we see. So putting the weight in the heel is going to force a little bit more tension into the relationship from the glute all the way down into the heel. So we don't want to get like that yogi foot necessarily where everybody in your class, their feet are kind of just spread way out and all the toes are spread way out, and we get this really solid yogi foot. Taught it for a long time, I know. Get more engagement of the feet, get more engagement of the feet, get more engagement of the feet. Like everything else, this stuff can be overdone. So what we started to see is that we were basically disconnecting the foot from the rest of the body when we're starting to move dynamically. So just kind of backed off a little bit from so much grabbing of the toes. You want to have some. But one of the things that we've been doing is getting people's, especially really advanced yogis that have been doing it for a long time, that their feet never got soft. Like their feet were from downward facing dog, they were like that. Lifting one leg up in the air, it was like that. They would step in the foot forward and it was like that. And there was a disconnect in the communication between the foot and the rest of the body. And again, it was just another way of working with something in separate parts instead of the whole relationship through the whole line being turned on and having a foot that's dynamic and sensitive and can react when necessary. One of the tricks that we've been doing is getting people's feet to be soft. I know we were doing some of this in Vietnam, getting people's feet to be soft and having them place the foot down as soft as possible, almost like this spreading out of the tissues of the foot. If I saw Maya, when you get a chance, I'll keep talking. But if I saw what skin soft would be a good one. Skin soft would be a good one. Do you mean how would we cue the foot? So the way that I would cue the foot, I'd have him come to standing right at the beginning, and we would go back and forth. So I would have him come to standing. I'll do this from down here so you guys can still kind of see me. I would have them come to standing. Imagine I'm standing all the way up. And I would have them just start to shift their feet from side to side. And as they do that, to start to see if they can feel how much of the ground is touching their foot, which parts of their foot are touching the ground, which parts aren't. And then I could even have them lift the foot, shake it out a little bit, leave the foot really soft. And then as they place the foot down, there's almost this spreading and melting of the foot on the ground. As they shift the weight into that foot, they'll start to feel the muscles of the leg turn on. It's going to happen. It's impossible for you to keep the foot soft and for you to start to shift weight into the leg. The body's reflexes will start to turn the muscles on and start to engage all the lines. So have them start to come back and forth into this feeling of sensitivity, spread, and then as they shift the weight into that foot, all of a sudden they'll start to feel the strength come in to hold them and going back and forth like that. Another thing that you'll see me do is I'll just start having them shift weight forward into the toes, backwards into the heels, side to side, using just enough tension to play here. Getting people more and more into their feet, into their legs. And this is something that we've been playing a lot with lately, a little bit more of the somatic experience of the pose, the somatic experience of movement, of turning them back into the universe of what it feels like instead of just the outer universe of either, doing exactly what the teacher says or trying to recreate the shape. Let's see. I just remembered a question. Would there be any value to spin on the heel the same way as the pinky packet? First, let me ask Maya. Maya, does that answer your question a little bit of different ideas that we can do with the foot? When she answers that, I'll move on and I'll take on Bjorn's question, but that idea of sensitivity, and we'll talk more about this also. But one of the things that starts to happen, especially in the way that if you guys, maybe Maya and Christian remember more than you guys, but I was much more of a cheerleader before. Good, Maya. I was much more of a cheerleader before getting, and it's still a very remedial and good way to get a newer student to get their muscles to turn on, would be this thing of squeeze more, squeeze everything, make everything strong from your feet, power up all the muscles of your legs, draw that strength up into your hips. Much more of a cheerleader. Jason and I were both much more cheerleaders when we started kind of developing this stuff. And the reason that we did that wasn't because that's the only way to work with muscles in the body, but we were working with people that for the most part didn't have any contractive energy in their bodies or had a very small amount of it, and we were trying to get them to a place where they could feel everything in their body turn on, where they could wake up muscles, where they could even understand how to engage strength. So we were much more like go, go, rah, rah, like make the muscles strong. We've got to be careful there, and I've started to back up a little bit, even at the remedial level, back up a little bit in the sense of we don't need everything to squeeze for any one of these poses. We need the tensions in the body to be balanced. Everything needs to have a certain amount of tension, but it's not maximum amount of available tension for every part of the body in every pose. If we do that and we overload that, what we're doing is we're putting a tension in one muscle that another muscle on the other side is gonna have to fight against to get through. And that could be something really valuable when you're talking about um, reciprocal relationships between muscles, like the way that the body, the way that the tricep can stretch in a healthy way would be to engage the bicep, to engage the opposite side muscles to stretch the tricep. That's good. But now if you're putting so much squeeze into the bicep and into the tricep that there's this tension there, and the tension is now even going into the shoulder and in the neck because I'm trying to work these relationships, now it becomes inefficient, and there's other parts of my body that are kicking on that I'm gonna have to overcome with another layer of tension in order to get the movement to happen well. Does that make sense? An example of this would be um, somebody whose face is like this in a pose, and there's a certain amount of energy and tension that's going into contracting the muscles of the face like that, or the muscles of the neck like that, and then somewhere else. If you can imagine that you're so tense in the neck that your shoulders blades are going up, and instead of easing that tension to just the amount that you need, if what you're doing is you're keeping everything squeezing, and then you're using another squeeze, pulling shoulder blades down to work against that tension, now you've got tensions that are fighting each other, and very rarely you're going to have the same amount of strength and ability to engage neck muscles and shoulder blade muscles at the same time. So if you're squeezing everything and you're in a tug of war between those two places in your body, one of them's going to win, one of them's going to get fatigued, one of them might start to get a little bit more strained. So coming to that place where we're trying to teach people a little bit more refined of how much to use. What is it that's being used? What is it that's being overused? What is it that's necessary? How much tension is necessary to hold in your hands to work with this stuff? And I'll still work with people at the beginning, and at the beginning it's like squeeze everything. Okay, and now let go of just enough tension just to be able to move the wrist a little bit. Now keep the tension. Can you let go of just a little bit more to allow the arm to move a little bit more freely? Now, how much tension can you hold? How much tension do you need to keep to allow movement, but within the boundaries of that tensional control? Does that make a little bit of sense? And then I'll take on Bjorn's question next. Well, you guys can come back and tell me if that made a little bit of sense, and I'll show you kind of what we're doing with those kinds of things. So Bjorn asked, would there be any value to spin on the heel in the same way as on the pinky packet of muscles? And he means while transitioning into some standing poses. And the answer is yes, Bjorn, absolutely. And we'll talk about that. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're doing with the legs and hips. But so this idea of this can be a really good pivot point on the hands. If you anchor down through the index finger knuckle, you're not pivoting anywhere. You're not going to pivot on your hand from your index finger knuckle without putting an immense amount of pressure on your inner wrist. It's just the structure of the hand doesn't really work to have this inner edge of the hand or the index finger or even the thumb side to be a pivot point. But now the pinky packet of muscles can be. So you keep your hand strong and you can maintain the strength from the shoulder blade, upper back, all the way through the hand without locking out the elbow. Especially if you got somebody that's hyperextending and they're locking out the elbow, you don't want them spinning on the pinky packet of muscles. They have to be here or even here. And then once you get that, this can be a place that you can, carpet isn't the best place to do it, but this can be a place that you can transition really well. Notice that my shoulder's not going over my wrist. I'm keeping an angle. but it's a really good place that I can transition pretty smoothly, keeping my hand on the ground and staying strong. So that has the same kind of idea happening in the heel, especially in this more dynamic movement, which is what we're teaching. We do teach static poses too, but like that other component, which I think is missing in a lot of yoga stuff, is the transitions. To me, it's much more interesting. The way we travel into a pose and the destination of the pose. It's how do we get there matters at least as much, and I would argue more than the actual pose. So this idea too of being able to turn on the foot just the same way that it'll be to adjust the hands, and even when we're talking something like Cobra, to be able, instead of having the hands static and locked in, so we're doing Cobra, now we've got a limited amount of available adjustment and adaptability in the hand. If we're locked out, pressed down through the index finger knuckle, be here, limited amount. So if you just don't place your hands perfectly, a little turned in, you'll see people do weird things. If we focus more here, now I've got all this capacity to spin, bring the elbows, draw them back, stay wide through the shoulder blades, push myself forward, spin on the way down. So now my shoulders and elbows are in a much better position because they're allowed to adjust and move as much as is necessary to keep the relationship a healthy one instead of anchoring down. And now I hope that everything's well aligned. So if my hands are too turned in and I come here, immediately I'm starting to feel a torque in my elbow. I'm too locked in on the hand, but I've got nowhere to go. I'm either gonna get pressure on the inner wrist, on the inner shoulder, I'm gonna get it somewhere instead of adaptability. One of the things that I've been playing around with is what's the definition of strength? Like, what is true strength? And I'll ask you guys to like kick that question around and see what the answer is for you. So when someone says being strong, what does that mean? The best answer that I've come up with is this idea of maximum adaptability. Maximum adaptability. Like that to me has been one of the best concepts that I've come up with what strength is. To be able to adjust to any situation in the most effective way possible. Yeah. Okay, so back to Bjorn's question about transitioning to standing poses. So Bjorn's question, if I understand it, would be in standing poses, would there be a value to this movement in the heel as we're transitioning? And for the same reason, to maintain, we do it on the pinky packet of muscles a lot of times, to maintain a healthy relationship between the point of contact with the ground and the shoulder, elbow, and upper back, so the relationship can continuously be adjusted in a healthy way to keep the shoulders safe, to keep the big joints safe, the wrists safe. So we're constantly able to adjust the relationship and connect the force where we want it into the bigger structures instead of putting a lot of pressure on the smaller structures. So when we're talking about spinning on the heel, it would be to do the same thing, to keep the relationship between the hip, knee, and ankle and ground contact to be a little bit safer and more connected. So when we're doing this here, to be able to adjust from the heel to continuously keep the hip crease back and keep the glute connection in the heel instead of having the foot anchored down. Now I'm pushing from butt there, but any kind of little thing that happens here, now my butt can push down into my heel. As my butt pushes down into my heel now, it's almost pushing my knee forward. If I've got my foot anchored, I've got to do weird stuff here like widen my knee. And if I'm moving from widening my knee, if you guys want to try this later, you can. If my knee's turned in here, and my cue to the student is widen your knee, feel how powerful that is and what muscles are being used to do that. Instead of getting them to lift their toes, line up the butt, the knee, and the heel, and go to that place. They can even put their fingers on their butt, hip crease back, and then from the right butt, push down into the right heel till you feel that relationship power on. And then trying to keep that same connection between the glute and the heel and seeing if they can turn that relationship. But notice that the relationship between hip, knee, and ankle are maintained, and the movement is coming from this turn of the thigh bone in the hip socket, and I'm maintaining that same point of contact. So when you'll see me do some of these movements here, we've been talking about this stuff like a surfing warrior or dancing warrior, you'll notice rarely do I just go toes here, because the relationship is changing. As I shift my weight forward into this foot, the relationship is changing, the angles are changing, the flexion in my knee is changing, depending on how much flexibility and openness I have in the ankle. That's going to be different. My hip flexors, if I come here, all of a sudden they're asked to take on more of the load. My butt is being disconnected from the heel. So since these relationships change, this allows me that maximum adaptability to be able to shift back and forth, but maintain the relationships where I want it. And slowly over time, those relationships, the circumference of how much movement you can get and maintain that good relationship, that will start to spiral bigger. Does that make sense? Instead of putting the foot down flat, widen the knee, that's not really gonna increase the range of motion around the hip socket. It's gonna continuously open the same spot instead of this exploration of what's going on in the hip socket. How did that do, Bjorn? Was that kind of what you were talking about? Do you cue the lower back when you do this movement, Maya asks? Specify. Explain. I was actually kind of stalling because Christian asked some really good questions he sent me yesterday, and it was funny, but they were basically the questions that I wanted to discuss. Like, they were specifically the things that I wanted to make sure to cover, and spine and hips and shoulders are, like, being honestly the biggest things that we deal with in yoga. Like, I wanted to have like a long talk with you guys about that stuff. Let's see what Maya says. Regarding the hip rotation, how some may take that a bit too far and shorten. Thinking of someone doing this for the first time. Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility. Usually what I'm cueing with low back stuff is it's gonna be earlier on, and I don't know if I don't know if I cue any low back stuff, like specifically. Do you cue any low back stuff? Like what kind of cues do you give for low back? I definitely give pelvic cues somewhat. I give somewhat pelvic cues. I definitely give rib cage cues, and I'll give some sort of belly TVA activation cues. And those, what I'm doing is, as I give those, I'm seeing what the effect is having on the low back and on the relationships of the spine. I don't specifically cue low back. Like I'm curious what specific cues you're thinking about. Like something like lengthen your low back. I'm not sure what. Let's see. Extend the low back as you draw the glute bones in. Extend the low back as you draw the glute bones in. Extend the low back. Yes, I'm just concerned because people, like, the way that movement happens, and I know you guys as teachers know this, people want to be really good students, and they really want to do what you say. So when you tell them something like that, they're going to do it. They're going to do it, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability. They're going to use whatever capacity they have to do the thing that they think that you want them to do. So that, a lot of times, what it leads to is them using other parts of the body that are going to lead to a compensation later in order to get that length in the low back. We'll talk about the low back and how, like, give Christian another couple minutes to see if he jumps in, and we'll talk about the low back and actually a little bit more of the core activation stuff, and how we're working on the pelvis and the low back being hyperextended. Are you running into a lot of people hyperextending their low backs, Maya? I mean, in general, we do. Because that's one of the things I also say extend the low back and extend the low back out and up in down dog. I mean, yeah, that would be that totally works. That totally works. But be an observer and see what happens and see what they're using to do that. Because a lot of times when you say extend the low back, they might, because even here's the thing, extend the low back. Here's where the anatomy here's where the anatomical language gets a little bit weird. An extended low back is actually a lordotic low back. I'll say that again. Anatomically speaking, an extended low back in anatomical terms is a lordotic low back. Does that make sense? So this is an extended low back. This is flexed, extended, flexed. Does that make sense? And even though I know what you mean, like I know that you meant lengthen the low back. Yeah, but anatomic, and again, if you get, and it's a pain in the ass, but it's happened to me a bunch of times where I sit down, like you get a physio in class, or a physical therapist in class, or a doctor in class, or whatever, a personal trainer in class, they can be a pain in the ass, and they can get very stuck. I mean, it's where their training like came from, and it was very kind of memorize this, don't forget this, memorize this, and they're looking much more like, you know, did you dot all your T's and cross your T's and dot your I's, and they're gonna get stuck on that. I actually had a class in Bali with this handstand gymnast, like really knowledgeable guy, but it was one of those things that we were talking about, drawing the sit bones together, and drawing the sit bones together, like glitched him completely. Like he understood it, but you could see that just like that thing was just like so, because the sit bones is basically, I wish I had a copy of a pelvis. Like the sit bones are like these two protrusions at the end of your pelvis. You're not gonna be able to draw them together that much. If anything, you can draw them together very, very little. What you can do is engage the muscles around them, and the muscles around can hug in as if you were squeezing them together. And for some reason, he just kind of glitched on that. It's like, that's not a big movement, can't be done. It took him like 10 minutes to get around his head to get to the point that I was trying to make with the sit bones. I'm like, if you try it, get the muscles to engage around as if you were trying to draw your sit bones together, and then that'll give the effect that we want. It'll give a hug in, it'll give the boundary to the pelvic floor, and like, and he was like, oh, okay. But it was like this one thing that, because the anatomy that he had been taught was a little bit different, he couldn't wrap his mind around. Like in his mind, he was seeing, you know, sit bones here and pulling them here, and they're attached to the pelvis, so that didn't make sense to him, and it just kind of glitched him. So like I've talked to Devin about that stuff too, and like it's a pain in the ass, and you guys know that for me, anatomy it's much more functional. I don't care if you remember the third bone of the fourth foot, whatever it is. But when you're within certain movements, like the bigger things that we say, the more that we can be precise when we do use anatomical terms, to use them in a way that if we do have a doctor, if we do have a physio in class, or a physical therapist, or somebody, that you guys are some of the most intelligent teachers that I know of, definitely in yoga circles. So to have you guys more and more be able to sit at a table with those people with the knowledge that you have, and be able to speak the same language, is important. Yeah, lengthen works better, Maya. Yeah, I definitely say lengthen works better than extend, just because of that thing. So I'm gonna get actually started with Christian's questions code. Well, let me look them up. Yeah. And feel free to jump in and let me know any other questions that come up. You don't have to give them to me in any specific order. In any specific order. Let's see. So some of Christian's questions, like really good. Like you can tell he's been thinking about this stuff for a while. One of the questions is going to be, what is ideal pelvic alignment, and how would you cue it? How would you cue it? If anybody wants to jump in and tell me what ideal pelvic alignment is? Jump in. What do you guys think ideal pelvic alignment is? Give me half a second. Let me jump out of this so I can get the email back. Right. I think it depends on the person's structures and needs, yes. Within reason, within range. Natural curves of the spine, yes, also. It is. It is. I think both of those, I think it depends on the person's structure and needs and natural curves of the spine. There is, yeah, both of those are really good answers. But both of those, but within both of those answers, there's a range of possibilities. There's a range of possibilities within both of those answers. Natural curves of the spine, there's variation there with natural curves of the spine. Not everybody's going to have the same depth of the natural curves of the spine. Somebody who's balanced in the natural curves of the spine might have a more pronounced thoracic curve, more pronounced, slightly more pronounced lumbar and cervical curves, and depends on the person's structure and needs. That's been the biggest thing. That's been the biggest thing. Because how do you take people that are completely tucked under and put them in a class with people that have their asses completely sticking out and cue in a way that you're getting both of those people that are starting from two very different places, from two polar opposite places, more close into this range of neutral that we're talking about. And to me, functional neutral is the place where you can be most efficient in movement and standing. Does that make sense? Now here's an idea that I kind of want to run by you guys. You are not going to cue someone into good posture that they're going to be able to maintain just by remembering the cues for a longer period of time. I don't know if that made sense in the way that I said it, but here's what I mean. You can get somebody into your class, tell them how to stand, hips back, belly long, ribs wide, shoulders on your back, chin in a little bit, lengthen, and they're gonna look like that. They're gonna do the posture. They're gonna do the posture. They're gonna listen to your cues. Their muscles are gonna fire, and they're gonna bring themselves into that neutral place. How long do you think that they're gonna be able to hold that before they get fatigued in that neutral place, in that new place? Pretty quickly. They're gonna get fatigued. And one of the things that I do when I'm working with someone privately, and I ask them to stand because I'm trying to body read them and I want to see the compensations in their body, and they come, and especially if they're good yoga people or yoga students, they'll come and they'll stand in front of me, Tadasana. Feet are pointed straight ahead, heels are lined up, toes are a little bit lifted, belly in and wide, ribs, like they get into this like really good Tadasana. That doesn't help me. Like I want to see where they are naturally at first, so I can see where the compensations in the body are. So I'll do something. I'll leave them there. I'll leave them there, and I'll go to the other room, and I'll start doing some stuff. I'll go to the bathroom, whatever it is. I'll grab some notes, and I'll come back, and I'll start talking to them. And you'll see pretty quickly, they'll start to go from that really good Tadasana into whatever their real neutral is, to whatever their real resting posture is. And the reason that happens is, we've talked about the plasticity of the fascial system, meaning that the body is going to adapt to whatever position it's in most. It's one of the genius things about the body to be able to take, this is how you want to be most of the time. No problem. We'll shrink wrap everything in your body with the fascial system in order to make this place that you want to be in all the time more efficient, and requires to make sure that position is more efficient and that it requires less energy. So if all of a sudden someone's been sitting like this for 20, 30 years, and now this requires very little muscular effort, their bodies have been shrink wrapped into this new shape, so now it's very efficient for them to be in this new shape as far as not having to expend a lot of calories or energy to do it. All of a sudden, you bring them here. This now, since you're fighting against tensions, this has been shrink wrapped this way, this has been shrink wrapped long, stay there. But now, if I start to open this up, now I'm working against this shrink wrap here, so the muscles on the back are going to start to fatigue as they're working against this tension here. Very quickly, as somebody's mind starts to go, they start to get fatigued, they're going to start to lose the ability to hold that again. The idea is eventually over time to make this that efficient neutral, where they spend more time here, where we train them more here. So now the tensions of the body are actually holding them here in an efficient way. And every time they come back to neutral, they're coming more back to this place. This takes longer. This takes longer. So not only putting them into movements, but having them do the movements in a way, giving them things to do and ways to do things where their bodies are being trained little by little over a longer period of time, that the rubber bands are being pulled and stretched and expanded where they need to be, so this becomes more of a new neutral. So the range of the neutral in their pelvis comes more from here to here, just in a more relaxed way. So a couple of things that we've been talking about for pelvic alignment. To me, good pelvic alignment, as far as a cueing thing goes, I'm looking for maximum weight in the heels. Maximum weight in the heels and still being able to have the ball mounds of the feet down and the toes lightly down. Been playing with that a little bit more as far as putting that into someone's body. Because when we're talking about having the heels be able to have maximum weight, gives us a place where we can connect the glutes, hamstrings, calves, all the way down to the heel in a powerful way. So you're aligned in a way that's going to allow you to use the strength of the back of your legs most efficiently. So your pelvis is in a place, pelvis, legs, feet are aligned in a way that from glutes to heels, you're able to get maximum ground reaction force. Does that kind of make sense a little bit? I'll show this now in a second, but I wanted to see if it made sense a little bit. Give me one more second, guys. Let me see if this one answered. Cool. So let me see how I can do this here. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. Let me see if I can get it a little bit more here so you guys can kind of see. Cool, thanks, man. Like I'm glad. I know I throw a lot at you guys, but it's because let's do this over here. But it's because there's a lot going on, and I don't want this to be cookie cutter anymore. And honestly, one of the biggest things, one of my biggest obsessions that it's been for a while now is I want to move you guys to the top of the pack as far as movers in that are doing things in a very intelligent way, and that are teaching yoga with really no regard for the limited standards of like a 200-hour system. Like the goal eventually would be that people practice with you, that you train teachers, and Yoga Alliance becomes a silly thing for anyone that looks like, oh, they trained with Christian, or they trained with Maya, or they trained with Z or Leah, or any of you guys, and that certification matters a lot more. That eventually that someone can come to you and you can be speaking with their doctor, with their physical therapist, and being part of the conversation with them, because I do think that that's what we're doing now is that important, and it is that on the cutting edge. And it's even a blind spot that in the medical profession right now, and even in physical therapy circles, there's huge blind spots as far as what movement actually is, as far as a whole system, as a whole body-wide system, instead of just fixing individual parts. And I do think that we're on the cutting edge of that. So this evolution of how we're talking about movement, we are on the cutting edge, and we're planting a flag and questioning and challenging a lot of things. So it's really exciting for me. So this kind of stuff, the more that I work with other people on the cutting edge of what we're doing, the more confident I am in the knowledge and ability that you guys have. So that's really cool. So to be able to give you guys more and more to play with, to contemplate, to question, to come back and challenge me and be like, hey, this isn't working, or hey, I'm not sure about this. This is something that I'm seeing in my classes. Like, that's how we grow together. That's how, like, this body of knowledge that we're working on can become something really even more powerful. So back to the heels and the pelvis. If I want to get maximum weight in the heels to be able to connect from my butt into my heels, I should have worn better pants. Here. So one of the things I've had people doing is I can have them, if somebody's here like this and way back, all of a sudden the weight's going to be in my toes. I'm pitching forward because I have to pitch forward to stay standing here. All of a sudden here, I don't have maximum weight in the heels. This person is going to need to go in the other direction to get the maximum weight in the heels. At the same time, if somebody's way tucked under, most people, when they're way tucked under, they're also going to have this anterior shift, this shift forward of the pelvis, and it's going to take the weight out of the heel some and put the weight more into the ball mounds of the feet. So what I want to do is I want to find that place where I can get maximum weight in the heels. Toes are a little bit lifted, ball mounds of the feet are down. And where is the spot where I can get maximum power from my butt pushing down into the heels? If I go too far and I start trying to push down, now my pelvis is pointed that way, and any time I try to push down, it's going to shift forward that power. If I'm too far back and I try to push down, anytime I push down, my pelvis is now turned back. That power, that strength is actually going to be sheared backwards, and it's going to be sheared into the low back. So I'm trying to find that spot where if somebody was to push down on my head and I was to take that force all the way down to the ground, it would go straight down into the heels. That is not a one-word cue. Did that make sense? I'll show you guys the way that I'm cueing it, but I wanted to give you guys the concepts first. And Christian can't answer, by the way. He's on, but he can't answer because he's not logged in. So we'll know that Christian is on there with us. But if you don't get this, at all and you're like mind blown, have no idea what the hell you're talking about, tell me that too. I'll keep talking till I see your comments. So now, if I'm going to be here and I want to start working into, give me 1 second. I'm going to hide back here and I'm going to change my pants to get better pants on so you guys can see better. Ta-da. Costume change in the middle. All right. See a little better here. Good. So now if I'm tucked under completely and I'm pushing my hips forward and I'm starting to go into a back bend, all of a sudden I've lost the ability to push it down into my heels, and I don't have the ability in my legs to extend my low back, to lengthen through my low back. I can't decompress here because I can't get the ground force reaction to come back up through my body to get the tensegrity to fire, to get that decompressive nature to come on. Let's see. Once you find that place and stay there and breathe, it feels so good. I haven't found that in a while. Cool. That's awesome. I find that when I cue students to soften behind their knees, they understand that space better. Yeah, absolutely, man. That's a really good point. It's a really good point. Locked out joints. We'll talk about locked out joints in a second and what that can do, because it basically stops that communication from the feet to the butt. So that's actually really good. To force the hips to do work in standing, not just because they are stacked. Yeah. And eventually they do want. We'll play with this now. So I'll come back to that response. Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm here and I start to do a back bend and I push my hips forward and squeeze my abs to try to, like, immediately I've lost tone here. I've lost the connections from my heels. So even if I squeeze my butt, squeeze calves, squeeze hamstrings, squeeze all these things, I'm squeezing them in individual muscles, not along the tension of the whole line. If I go too far back now, if I got my butt way far back, belly long, and I start to come back here, at a certain point when I come back, now I'm still in my toes. I've lost the ability to push into my heels here, see where my pelvis is pointing. I've lost that ability. But now if I can, if I can shift, there was another word that I'm using instead of tuck under. If I'm gonna start to shift my pelvis, I'm gonna start to tilt my pelvis down just enough to get the weight back in the heels. I can go back a little bit further, keep pushing down. There I'm losing it again. I can here to push down into the heels, push down into the heels, push down into the heels, push down into the heels. So I'm doing just enough of this so I don't lose the ability to push down into my heels. Does that make sense? I can sit here and talk to you guys even with my head off to the side, because I'm still in that spot where I'm finding maximum weight in the heels. Does that make a little bit of sense there? And one of the things I will have students do at the beginning is go back and forth. Start to tuck the pelvis under, see what that does. See how that wants to shift you forward. And then slide your butt back. See if you can put the weight in the heels. Where does the weight in the heels with your toes lifted feel strongest? And that's the place that you want to lift up from. And it's going to have a little bit of give. It's not going to be just like 1 millimeter and that's the place you're going to be. You can have a little bit of give back and forth, but the relationship between your butt and your heels is being adjusted constantly. Pelvis down to the earth. Are you thinking contractive energy directions and stuff? But pelvis down to the earth. I like to say from your butt push down into the heels. From your butt push down into your heels, and hip creases back. From your butt pushes down into the heels. So even because it's both that's happening at the same time. It's a rebound. It's a rebound. There's if you think about lines of communication, it's like communication is being sent down into the heels, and from the heels it's coming back up. So there is this bounce almost of information. So from pelvis down into heels, and from the feeling of the heels, there's an echoing that comes back. So it's constant. It's almost like a what is that? Like a sonar, like an echo finder, like a sonar where like the butt is sending signals down into the heels, and boop, 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 and the rebound, the echo rebound comes back out through the legs, and that strength travels back up into the heels. So how much force you push down on the heels travels back up into the glutes. But yeah, there definitely is a push down. There's a powerful push down. One of the ways that I'll, especially in standing poses, you guys have seen me teach Trikonasana like this, that I'll have people lift the foot, inner thigh back, and I want them to find that place where from the butt they can push down powerfully in the heel. And then I want them to keep pushing from the butt down into the heel without losing that push. Place the rest of the foot down, but keep that power from the butt down into the heel and maintain that power the whole way down. That's one of the ways I start to try to get them to get into that feeling. Yeah. So ideal pelvic alignment is, it's a relationship. It's a relationship. Ideal pelvic alignment is a relationship between the pelvis, the connection between, and the rib cage, and that really what it is, and the pelvis and the legs and the heels. So if someone is here because they've been like duck butt like this for so long that basically this stuff on the front of their bodies has shortened. Let's say psoas, hip flexors, all this stuff is just basically short all the time. That even if they try to tuck under, they can't tuck under so much, especially if they lock out their knees. That's kind of what Maya was going for. If they lock out their knees, that tension is here. If you can get them with their knees bent, you're gonna have a much better chance of getting their hip flexors to soften a little bit, putting the weight in the heels. And this might be it for them for now. And slowly over time, they can push from their butt down into their heels. And as long as they can maintain the weight in the heels, they can start to extend out through the hip socket more and more. Because we do want someone eventually to be able to extend their hip fully without every time they stand up, they come into this position because this is so short that it can't open. But at the beginning, we do want them to be here so they can soften, get the weight in the heels, and then they can push down and try to get this stuff to lengthen. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to talk about the ribs now. We're going to talk about the ribs now. Yeah. But does that make sense? That even if somebody wants to do it, like it's there could be something in their bodies right now. There could be some kind of shortness somewhere in their bodies that's not letting them get into the position that we want them to get into yet. So it's slowly over time. So the softening of the knees, the softening of the joints allows those rubber bands that are in full compensation pattern, everything is locked in, nothing can move because it's just where it is. We bring a little bit of slack to the rubber bands, we can realign the body, and then a little bit more mindfully put the strength where we need to put the strength and start to grow the rubber bands long. But now we're more sensitive to find out, ooh, I'm trying to grow the rubber bands long. I'm trying to keep my hips back and long as I extend, but all of a sudden when I get to a certain spot, bam, I lost it there. It's like, okay, cool. Now I know where I've got to play. I've got to play here and work on slowly over time making this my new neutral to the point that I could eventually come into a much more neutral place. And just so you guys understand what neutral pelvis is as far as some of the body reading stuff, if you go ASIS, which are these little hooks on the front and this little hook on the back, little bump right under here and right under here, those 2 points should be more or less in the same line. I'm slightly anteriorly tilted. I used to be much more anteriorly tilted. My new neutral is about there when I've been working with some of these lines, some of these tensions, and you can see I got the lumbar curve on, butt's back, but this is my resting spot. I'm not here, which would be a tuck under, and I'm not here, which would be hyperlordotic. Here. And I'm probably forever going to be a little anteriorly tilted, but this is much more my neutral now. Heels are heavy, I can lift my toes, it doesn't do anything. So as I'm shifted forward, and all of a sudden I lift my toes and I fall backwards, I can lift my toes and nothing happens to my posture. You'll notice a lot of people are here. You ask them to lift their toes, and all of a sudden you'll see this shift back because they've had all of their weight shifted here. And that shifted weight into the toes can be two things. If you think hyperextended knees and butt back here, and someone's leaning into their toes, yeah? Think high-heeled shoes, butt way back, leaning forward into their toes, yeah? Or even this tuck under and anteriorly shifted pelvis also can be in their toes. So both of these patterns, which are two of the most common patterns we're going to see in yoga, you get them to lift their toes, and you'll see, whoa, you'll see them kind of like shift back into their heels. It's not a place that they're used to being. They're going to have to adjust something to be able to maintain that, and that's a good thing. To make them lift their toes and have the adjustments in the body start to happen so they can start to figure out a little bit more steady, stable place to be in their legs. Expansive in the ribs, absolutely. Expansive in the ribs is huge. Hold on, I'm gonna bring some friends for you. Hold on a second. Okay, I brought some friends. I brought some friends. Yeah. And you guys all know the other guy. And this guy. Yeah. So absolutely, I mean, you guys have all played with Baby Groot or seen me play with Baby Groot. Obviously, the more tension we have in the rubber bands, it's what keeps them bouncy. It's what keeps them safe. It's what keeps them decompressed and able to bounce back into neutral. Over flexibility, over flaccidity, like this sounds like almost remedial talking to you guys, even though in most circles it's the conversation is still in the early stages. But we know that what keeps us safe and bouncy and able to keep the joints decompressed, it's not more flexibility, more length, more length, more length. The more that we put length in it, the less tension there are in the rubber bands that are pulling the sticks apart to keep space between the joints. All of a sudden we lose the tension in the rubber bands and we have bones that are kind of crunching together. Yeah. And now talking about expansiveness in the ribs, we have two diaphragms. You guys know that also. Got the main one that everybody knows about, which is this big diaphragm here that attaches to the undercarriage of the ribs, to the under circle of the ribs. But there's also this pelvic floor diaphragm. And these two diaphragms, to me, these are the bellows. Like when we talk about like expansiveness, like the two places that we can work expansiveness from the inside are really only the two diaphragms. Those are the two places that we can fill up and get this push out of strength. So what can happen here is like he looks kind of cool, but there's not a lot. He's got a lot of potential power. So the elasticity in this has a lot of potential power, but it's not active. He's uninflated. He's here like this. Now, if you can imagine, that he's got all of these rubber bands covering him all over his body in all sorts of different directions. And you can see here that even though he's got this rubber band and this rubber band around his body is also him. What is him? He's my little dinosaur. He's one of my assistants. Yeah, I know he's a weird dinosaur. You'll see. Yeah, I walk around with strange shit. Like the strangest yoga teaching props ever is like the shit that I find to do this stuff with. But even though there's potential energy in this rubber band that I put here, there's not a lot of available power right here. There's not a lot of available power right here. But now, if I was to expand this guy from the inside, now he's got some power. Now, not only does he have some power, he's got some bounce. If I was to push down into him, my hand would be bounced out of here. He's got potential power, but not only that, but now this rubber band that had only potential power, since it's being expanded from the inside, now we get to activate not just potential power, but real power. That this can be used to move, to expand, to explode, to jump, to throw. But now we're talking about real powerful stuff. It can be used to float. It can be used to become more buoyant, to have the whole system appear lighter because the tensions are more balanced and spread out throughout the whole system. Does that make a little bit of sense? It's just kind of a visual cue to figure out why we do this expansion thing. You can think about us the same way. On the inside, when we're small, all of these rubber bands become more slack or more tight. When we expand, now all of these rubber bands that we have going across our whole body, instead of being disconnected and soft, we expand. And now we've got this potential here. So we're talking something like the lateral lines. If I'm using this here, and I've got this on the side of my body, this big elastic rubber band here. If it's slack, it can't pull me back. But now if I can get big and expand it and keep the expansion as I go over, this line now becomes much more efficient because it's protecting me from going too far over. Now it's getting long and elastic, and no matter how much this squeezes in, since I have this big expansion on the inside, there's this counter force that's keeping me buoyant and uplifted even as I come down, and it can keep me decompressed and bounce me all the way back up. So I talk about this stuff not like releasing tensions, but like surfing the tensions. So we can surf the tensions in the body here. So big ribs, here's the tension here, and I could almost juggle it. Now it's going from this part of my body. Now I'm feeling it go along the middle of my back. I'm gonna try to maintain it, and now I feel it on the other side. Now here's the tension here. Now I've got it on the other side. There's my rubber band. I'm here. And now I could try to maintain that. I'm gonna surf it here. Now I feel it coming along my shoulder. Now I feel it along my shoulder blade. It's moving towards my low back. It's more middle of the spine, middle back. Now I'm gonna start to juggle it over to the other side. I've got it on this shoulder blade. Comes towards this shoulder, all the way from this hip to the other arm. And I can juggle the tension this way. So it becomes this real fluid way to move, or I stay expansive instead of more linear. All this stuff, I flatten that line out. I don't have that long tension. There is no tension on my left side, just a lengthening, but there's nothing to keep me decompressed and out of this leg except for pure muscle power. This hip flexor is already feeling it. My outer hip is already feeling it here. That buoyancy right there, I can be here for a while. The tensions are more balanced in my body. I can be more buoyant here instead of here, where now I'm asking these little individual parts to take on the whole load of the body because it's not being spread out throughout the whole system. Does that make sense? Let's see what we got here. Expanded instead of squeezed. Yep, definitely expanded instead of squeezed. I lost the chat, guys. Give me a second. You guys still on there? Let me know if you guys are still on there. I lost my computer, but the phone seems to still be live. Give me a signal if we're still on. Are we still on? Guys still there? Somebody send me a chat if we're still on. Shit, we lost the internet, love. Damn it. Are we on? Are we on? I'm gonna check. Guys, bear with me if you're still there, just bear with me. Okay, still here, Maya says. All right, cool. You can still see and hear me. All right, send me your questions through here because I lost the other computer. So I'll just kind of keep talking here. Cool. So did you guys see the difference between that side angle and the other side angle, and using this expansiveness, and the reason why we're using this expansiveness and getting into the elasticity of the body and what it can do when we're talking about movement. One of the funniest things, this handstand teacher in Bali, Mark Doss, like really good handstand guy, and he's been wanting to like pick my brain for a long time. He takes my classes, and he sat down with me, and one of the first things that he was telling me, he's like, he wanted to know how long I train for, like how like what my training regimen is, and I was like, I don't consider what I do training. I don't do like rep practices like they do. If you're looking at somebody like DK Movement and some of these guys, and they're doing like straddler presses and you know, and doing, you know, repetitions of this and you know 3 times 10 of this, and I don't train that way. I don't work that way. I'm much more interested, instead of doing reps towards a specific movement. I'm more interested in working on this kind of stuff and how to get the tensions to balance more, how to find the places that I can't access in my body. Like, where can't I get that tension? I've got it here, but ooh, I lose it here on certain poses. So that becomes really curious and fascinating to me. It's like, oh, how do I get that part back in? Why isn't that part working? Why does my right butt not fire the way my left butt fires? Is my right hip forward? Why do I feel it on my outer right leg, not on my outer left leg? So that becomes a much more fascinating way for me to work into this stuff. Not necessarily that idea of, and he was, I mean, he came with, it was funny, he came with, I mean, you guys know me, you've seen my notes. So this guy was probably the exact polar opposite of me. He came for you guys in Vietnam, much more like, he's probably like Mikey's long lost brother. Mikey's long lost brother. He came with an Excel spreadsheet of all the different exercises that he does, like a graph of when he started, how the week went, how long he was able to hold certain things, where the breakdown was. So he was tracking all of these different things in his body depending on these reps and these timed holds and these other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that kind of discipline and focus into something that he finds really interesting. He's a handstand guy, and that's his main focus, arm balances, and it's great. I'm much less specific with the way that I train. I want to be able to. I want to be able to do anything. Like, for example, I get fascinated and interested in different things. Wushu, Tai Chi, Kung Fu fans, like these really cool like fans that they're big fans, and samurai used to use them back in the day also, to practice sword fighting without practicing sword fighting, so nobody could tell that they're practicing sword fighting. Well, I just ordered 2 of these fans because I want to know how to move like that. I want to know the stuff that we're doing in our bodies, if I can find the rhythm of that fan without actually going to Japan and training for 5 years to become a really good imitator of that movement. It's just, can we figure this stuff out? Can we get the body to move so well that we do have that maximum adaptability to it? Yeah. Cool. Let's see what the next question is. Let's go to this one first. Okay, get another question from Christian. Is what is ideal? You've said engagement. Ideal shoulder engagement. The first time that I read Christian's question, I thought it said, what is ideal shoulder alignment? But he asked, what is ideal shoulder engagement? I wish Christian was logged in so we can get a little bit more details on what he specifically was asking. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think about as ideal shoulder, either engagement or alignment? Hold on, I'm reading back through the questions that went away before. So the idea of maintaining healthy tension and not squeezing the parts that can find softness. Yeah, like I tend to do. Yes, Maya, definitely, definitely. Like we all tend to do. And like anything else, we can get so good at doing these individual little things that it's like more, squeeze more, squeeze more, squeeze more. Okay, wait, whoa, too much, too much. Like you're squeezing too much, you're actually over tensing something that doesn't need to be over tensed. So it's, and I've talked about it before, I've talked about it for years, but like we rarely ever go from not enough to just right. Normally we go from not enough to way too much, and then we back it down into just right. And that still applies. That still applies. At the beginning, someone comes in, they can't feel their legs at all. Squeeze everything. Squeeze toes, squeeze ankles, squeeze knees, squeeze calves, squeeze everything. Okay, everything is there, fired. All right. What actually needs to be squeezing? Like, is your hamstring doing more than your quad? And is in your certain position? Can you start to feel the shift in energy? So as you shift, let's say you're in some kind of lizard lunge, and you're going from this lizard lunge, then from the half Hanuman, you can push down into your heel, start to drag yourself forward. So now I feel it in my hamstring. But as I start to come forward at a certain spot, the tension starts to go from my hamstring. Now it's more in my quad as I come here. So there's a balanced tension. It's not as if hamstring on, and then there's a straight switch. Hamstring turns off, quad turns on. Doesn't work that way. There's a give and a take. So there's a constant relationship of the hamstring lets go a little bit, the quad grabs a little bit more, and then back the other way. So to be able to refine that relationship and even the ability to sense those shifts as you pull from the hamstring, and then there the other part of the body starts to push. So then now from the butt I can push down into the heel and start to pull back and see where those relationships are happening. And then I can start doing that through all parts of the body and adding rib stuff. So it's not one turns on, other turns off. It's much more of an organic dance between these different tensions of the body. What lets go as something else grabs, and how do they play this tug of war of pull and push so the tension is maintained, so some of the expansion and buoyancy and elasticity is maintained, but just enough to keep the tension, not to squeeze and stick everything. Yeah. Yep, still working. Do whatever brings you joy. That may be different to different people. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and that to me, that idea of do whatever brings you joy, that may be different things for different people. Absolutely, and that's why I love teaching this way. Because even that guy that came in with like the spreadsheet and the repetitions and doing that, like we played together for 3 days. I showed him some stuff, and I guarantee you that that didn't mean that he changed the way his training went completely and started to be organic and playful and get curious about one part, and he became me in 3 days. That's not what happened. Like, hopefully that's not what happened. I'm sure he took the pieces that I gave him, and hopefully he was able to use some of those things to inject them back into his training, the things that he loves to do. Because you could tell, like, his spreadsheet Excel thing, he loved it. He loved looking and seeing that yesterday his handstand hold was 1 minute 15 seconds, and today was 1 minute 22, and trying to figure out why those 7 seconds were added on today and what he was able, like, he was fascinated by that. I'm not going to try to take that away from him. If anything, I want to give him more stuff that can make that more enjoyable to him, and help him understand his spreadsheet better and his body better and those things. But yeah, it's a great point there. Okay. I find that my students, Maya says, I find that my students find engagement with expansion through the space. I find that my students find engagement with expansion through the spaces between the shoulder blades. I love that one. That's a good one. That's a good point. Oh, Christian is on, just can't comment. Yeah, I know. I know. I find that my students find expansion with the spaces between the shoulder blades, and yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. Like the old idea, or even military posture or yoga, squeeze your shoulder blades together idea. Yeah, that's problematic, and we've talked about this a lot, but this is not any healthier than this. It's just a different idea. All we're doing is taking the rib cage and doing a shift back of the rib cage or a shift forward of the rib cage. And we don't want the shoulder blades to crash together. The shoulder blades crash together, that tension between the shoulder blades, so that tensional relationship goes away, and there's just a slamming and a squeezing and a compression between the shoulder blades. We need something to counterbalance that. We need something to counterbalance that, so they're not only going in one direction. There always needs to be some kind of counter pulling in the opposite direction. So instead of, shoulder blades are really complicated, just because I'll bring this the next time we do this in the next week or two. When we do this, I'll bring some stuff out on the shoulder blade. But if you can imagine the shoulder blade being like this, and there's all these different lines of pull. Almost you can imagine the shoulder blade like a wheel, and on this wheel, there's lines of tension pulling in all of these different directions. You can almost think about like spokes on a wheel that are pulling the shoulder blade in different directions. And now, if you really wanted to start to try to get individual muscles on this very complex thing that are all pulling in different directions, and you think that you're going to work the supraspinatus, that you're going to work the infraspinatus, that you're going to work the subscap, that you're going to figure out a way to individually engage and fire all of these different muscles in such a perfect way that you bring them into perfect balance. I mean, I think that's a little bit naive and you're going down a place of like a lot of fucking frustration, like because it really is that complex. It really is that complex. And as soon as you over pull one, and these aren't the only pulls of tension, each of these different lines that has different pulls of tension on it is also connected to something else, which is connected to something else, which has its own lines of pull line. So literally where your pinky toe is pulling on the back of your knee is going to have an effect on some of the relational tensions here. So even though you get this tension perfect, if you're not accounting for something as specific as which way your pinky toe on your right foot is pointed, you're not going to be able to specifically get all the math done to find out how much actual tension you need to pull on this one to get the shoulder blade to fire. Very complex structure. Very complex structure. And by the way, guys, this is a thing that especially in the last teacher training, I talked about a lot. It's much more effective. Let me go backwards. The mind and body don't really understand as far as it comes to relationships and movement, engagement of individual muscles. It understands tasks. It understands tasks. So let's say I had baby Groot over here and I wanted to pick up baby Groot. The brain, the communication between the brain and the body isn't, engage the anterior left shoulder to flex. Good. Now squeeze the tricep to extend the arm, pull the pelvis back to shift forward, widen the right inner thigh, squeeze the foot, draw the ribs in. Now extend, use your left flexor muscle to extensor muscle to extend the left finger, extend the middle finger, extend the other finger. Good. Now extend the wrist, lean forward. Now, and all of these different individual movements to pick something up. What the brain understands is like, there's some shit over there, go get it. And then we go get it. And it is so fast that my hand can move faster than I can consciously think movement into my hand. So much more effective to put people, when we're talking about rebuilding good patterns in the body, the same way we're talking about posture being something that, even though you can get someone cued into good posture, about 2 minutes in, they're going to go right back to where their fascial system, their neuromuscular system has been at neutral for a long time once they get fatigued. So if we want to affect them in a very powerful way and in a way that is going to be something that's going to be really absorbed into their system, and they're going to be able to take it not only from a yoga class but in their daily lives, it's a much more effective and efficient way to have them perform a task and cue them on how to perform the task well, how to put their bodies in a way, how to like put things in a position where the muscles are going to fire the way that we need them to fire. So instead of being here and asking them, to squeeze your thigh, squeeze your belly, squeeze this, squeeze your feet, it's draw the inner thigh back, push from your butt down into your heel. When I tell somebody to push from their butt into their heel, I'm not actually giving them anything to engage. Does that make sense? I'm not actually giving them, bye Leah. Yeah, well, hopefully this will record too, and you guys can read this and go back over it a lot of times. I'll at least have the audio come in. Lost my train of thought. That when I said push from your butt down into the heel, I didn't actually tell people to engage anything. I didn't have them squeeze a muscle. Does that make sense? I didn't have them squeeze a muscle. It's a little bit of a different idea. The pushing from the butt down into the heel when we put the legs and pelvis where I wanted it, that push down, the brain understands that push down. Oh, you want me to push? I can push. Here we go. And now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, when the body's like this and I push, now I can have their hands on their butt and have them feel what turns on. And I can start rebuilding that connection and start doing that in a way where the movements that we give people, it's a huge part of this, that the movements that we give people feel good. So once I can get them to fire and do the things that I want them to do, from the butt push down into the heel, It feels good. They feel powerful. There's going to be a little bit of a very kind of survival instinct reward thing that happens to us. It's like something that feels good in our brain. We get like some kind of chemical cocktail that gets unleashed, and we're like, ooh, wait, I got a reward for that. That's a good thing. I want to do more of it. You can think really basically that's, when we eat something that we enjoy, we're getting calories into our body. That's good for survival. We get a kick. Sex, that's good for the species. We get an endorphin kick. These things that are good for us, that are healthy for us, have a tendency to give us that kind of endorphin kick if we do them in a right way. So these movements, doing them in a way that feels good, giving them to your students in a way that feels good, will have that little bit of an endorphin kick, and they're going to be more likely to do this. I'm not necessarily looking to make disciplined people. Like, that's not the thing. I don't want people that can follow me really well and will listen to everything that I say and don't bother me in class and are good little followers. Like, I honestly don't give a shit about any of that. I don't give a shit about any of that. Like, I want people that are empowered to do their own thing. So it's not about can they be disciplined enough to do everything that I say. It's like I want to use every trick in the book to help them realize that this is something that is beneficial to them. That when they see that, it's not about discipline. They're not doing it for me. They're not doing it because they think yoga is good for them. They're doing it because it feels good, because they want to do it. Yeah. Okay. So we did a little bit of the ground force reaction thing. We did some of the hip stuff. We did some of the feet stuff. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about. Oh, let's go back to shoulder. I never even said what my shoulder thing was. Maya had said something here. An anatomy guy said that when you have wrinkles in the skin, there's probably not enough expansion. That's. I like where he's going with that. I like where he's going with that because that is a good visual cue. You will start to see crimping and folds, and it takes a trained eye. I wouldn't use that as a gospel thing, but it really does give you a sense of it. Like if you see, and especially the more that you look at more and more people's bodies, you do see this kind of compression and squeeze, and there is a sense, like there is a sense. I don't know if I want to say it. I know what he's talking about, and he's right. It just takes a trained eye to know, because everybody has some amount of wrinkles, and wrinkles in the skin don't necessarily have to mean that there isn't enough expansion there, but it can give you a clue, and give you a clue to somewhere that's not expanding properly, especially if you're doing something like, how can I do it here? Like if there's that big kind of like squeeze and crimp there probably isn't enough of that expansion going on there. So that's a good shorthand to see if there's enough expansion there. As far as good shoulder alignment, shoulders on the back, shoulder blades on the back. It's not the best as far as descriptive cue, but shoulders on the back is what we want. I like shoulder blades on the back and wide. Shoulder blades on the back and wide. So we don't want shoulder blades that are on the back like that and squeezing in, because that's not real width. And actually what's going on when you do something like that, it's actually, this is what's going on with the shoulder blades there. The rib cage is pitched forward, and the shoulder blades are actually doing that a little bit. So there is a winging. The shoulder blades are coming in, and there is a winging that's going out. So that's not necessarily a good shoulder alignment. We know that too. So this, you notice when I'm here, my shoulder is going behind here. So there is more chest than back in front of the shoulder. There's more chest in front of the shoulder than back behind the shoulder. And then when you got somebody that's rounded forward, it's the opposite, right? It's like my chest disappears more. Now you can see more of my back. There's more back than chest. What I'm looking for in shoulder alignment as far as a visual cue, I want the shoulder to be between the back and the chest. I want some back and some chest on either side of the shoulder. So I want my shoulder to land more or less in the middle between my chest and my back. Does that make sense? Now that's a visual cue, but as far as what I want as far as engagement, I will normally not necessarily cue shoulders. I'll cue ribs, wide ribs, and take your shoulder blades back and apart. I'll teach that stuff being on the wall where they have to keep their upper back on the wall and try to go wide through their shoulders. Like they're trying to take this point of the shoulder and this point of the shoulder and widen them out. Does that make sense? Shoulders are tricky. Shoulders are tricky because, again, different things over a long period of time, pec minor, pec major, especially people that are very used to doing push-ups or gym rats, or even like yogis that have been doing chaturangas for a long time, arm balances for a long time. This is going to start to shorten here, and even this is going to start to shorten here. So as much as they want to do what you're saying, get their shoulders on the back, this is going to take some time to open. We'll talk about some myofascial release stuff that you can start to give your students. Some real basic ones. I mean, I've got some on the YouTube video. I've got some on the YouTube video, like, or on IGTV, of just the one that you take the ball, take a lacrosse ball or something, and you put it here, and you start to get those tissues to release. Almost everybody that I know could use some of that, especially in yoga, to allow this to happen. Because if this is short here, and I want to get somebody to get their shoulders back, and this won't open. Remember, people are going to want to do what you say, and the mind's going to be like, oh, he said shoulders back. Cool. This stayed short. All I did was take my rib cage and push my rib cage forward to give the illusion that my shoulder blades are on my back. But I didn't actually get them on my back. I just moved the rib cage out of the way. This is still short. This is still rounded forward. I just did a workaround to make it look like I got my shoulder on my back. Instead of big expansive ribs, and try to widen the middle of your shoulders away from each other. That starts to give this idea of opening here, and it's working from the rib cage, and it starts to get more of the muscles to fire instead of just this getting out of the way here. It's a difficult thing to work on in yoga, though. Let's see. What about cueing someone to align ear and shoulder? I mean, aligning ear and shoulder is great, but if they don't have a mirror, they're not going to know how to do that. Does that make sense? Try to align your ear and your shoulder. Do you know where your ear, and keep in mind that you guys are great movers. Like, you guys are great movers, and you guys have great body awareness. And if I asked you to do that, it would be difficult because I'm not sure where my ear is in space in relation to my shoulder without looking. And that idea, when we talked about this being the fascial system going and shrink wrapping you into a new neutral, well, guess what your mind does too? Your mind will make this a neutral. Someone will think that they're standing straight. The best example of that is you have someone close their eyes, walk in place, and now stand neutral, stand with their feet. And you ask them, are your feet pointed straight ahead? And they'll say yes. And you look down at their feet, and one is turned out this way, one is straight forward. Or you'll see a whole bunch of different varieties of the feet, and their mind swears that their feet are pointed straight ahead. Their mind, just like their body's been wrapped up in this new neutral, their mind now believes that this, without looking, it feels like this is pointed straight ahead. Does that make sense? So to tell somebody to, wow, it would be, what if somebody's got massive head forward position? I'm going to try to do this. Massive head forward position. And you ask them to align their ears with their shoulders. Like, that's going to be really, really difficult for them to do. That's going to be really, really difficult for them to do. I mean, I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but those are two markers, because the reason that their ears aren't aligned with their shoulders might have nothing to do with their rib cage. It might have to do with their cervical spine and having head forward position. Does that make sense? It's just, it might work in a specific situation if you got a specific person, but as far as saying that for a big public class, I think that would be difficult. Even though, for the most part, you'd be right. Collarbone broad works. I like collarbone broad. Let's see. Let me go back. What about cueing someone to align ear and shoulder? We talked about that. Ribs towards inner edge of arms. Like widening the ribs towards the inner edge of arms. That could work. But see that like Maya, like you can even tell like where the poetics of this stuff come. Like I love these kinds of cues because it puts people's eyes and minds in different parts of their body that they might not have thought of. And I like that idea, even for something else apart from the shoulders. Widen the ribs towards the inner edge of arms. I like that more, less as a shoulder thing, but more as just as a rib cage expansion thing. Like that's really cool. But that's, yeah, that I love that. Yeah, let's see. Collarbones broad. Yeah, I like that. I like collarbones broad. Yeah. What about if they use their hands to find their ear and their shoulder? I'm curious. I can't wait to get you guys on a Skype call where I can see what you guys are doing, so I can figure out what that is. Yeah. What about they use their hands? I'm not sure what you mean about using their hands. So I like the collarbones broad. I like the collarbones. Make your collarbones and shoulder blades wide. Yeah. I like that because it gives you the idea on the front and it gives you the idea on the back, which is what we want. So collarbones wide, shoulder blades wide. I like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure because which part of the ear is with the hands. It's tricky. It's tricky. Thumb and index finger. Thumb and index finger. It's just a little awkward. It's a little awkward. If you have somebody that's like this and they can't, if somebody's already restricted in their shoulder, like think about how much mobility you need to have in your shoulder to even kind of do that well. Huh. But again, it's something that you can play with. I mean, play with it and see how it goes. I'm not sure. Yeah. So, kind of wanted to talk, because we do a lot of this stuff, but I want you guys to be careful with this stuff. Again, that idea of this stuff can be overdone, especially if when we're doing this stuff here, it's going up here. So especially when we're doing stuff like beach ball arms, make sure they're dropping the weight of the elbows down. Make sure they're dropping the weight of the elbows down. You don't want them to be beach ball arms up here where there's this winging and internal rotation of the shoulders. See how this internally rotates my shoulders? Now this is actually adding to this. Yeah. So when you come up, it's got to be drop the weight of the elbows down like you're hanging the weight of your arms on your upper back. And that will start to get some of these muscles in the mid back to fire and hold this weight instead of this internal rotation up here, which now it's asking the pec minor to hold, and it's asking some of the neck muscles to hold. And for most people, that neck is doing way too much in this position anyway, to have them drop their elbows, widen ribs. Yeah. But shoulder blades on the back, wide collarbones, looking as a teacher, looking to get the shoulder between the chest and the back. Yeah. Without squeezing the shoulder blades. Yeah. Which is another one of the reasons that it's not that it's a horrible, I use collarbone cue for this one. I like the collarbone cue. I like the collarbone cue, but I would ask also to add something on the back, because you want them to be connected also to what their shoulder blades are doing and to understand that they're back there and that the shoulder blades have a big deal to do with this stuff. So, and especially, like you guys know, like front of the body, most of us are connected to the front of the body. Put some of the awareness on their back too. Give them some awareness of what's happening back here, of that feeling of what's happening back here as they breathe. Shoulder blades on the back and wide as they keep their collarbones wide, like some kind of thing that they could talk about on the back. Okay. Yeah. So even this idea, I'll give you guys more stuff on how we're working with this stuff, and I'll leave that for next time, because I'm gonna keep you guys here for too long if I keep giving you more of this stuff. But even if you guys want to do this quickly with me for a second, this idea of if you were to take your arms, palms flat out forward, and don't hurt yourselves, but just kind of open your chest forward and take your arms back, you could feel, even if you take a big breath into your upper back and try to keep the shoulder blades from coming together, it's really hard to do. Something that you can do now. Take a big breath and turn from the shoulder blades, turn palms in, and then keep, so it's the whole arm turns in, almost like the pinky packet of muscles turns the whole shoulder blade out. Imagine you're doing the opposite. Big breath, and then try to stay wide And now, almost like you're spreading water out in front of you in all directions out that way. And keep a big breath expanded and do this. Feel how that almost prevents your shoulder blades from coming together as easily. And that's one thing that we've been playing with, just because the twist that it puts into some of these tensions from the pec major, the muscles come here and they actually twist and they go into the arm bone here. So if I do this, I'm actually increasing the twist from the chest muscles into the arm. So you can imagine I'm taking this and I'm doing this. I'm taking this, which is the pec major muscle, some of the other fascial tissues that are connecting to the humerus, and I'm doing this. So this twist here is actually putting, it's not going to be a lot, but it's enough. I'm going to put this twist there. Now that twist shortens the rubber bands, puts a little bit more tension in them, which is going to prevent them from opening so much that I lose the tension and shoulder blades squeeze together, but it's also allowing me to start to stretch these things in here in a more elastic and powerful way. Yeah, so that's one of the things. I'll give you guys a little bit more of those individual little things later. Yeah, that cue actually comes last, usually after the space we get the shoulder blade. Cool, I like that. I like that. I like that, Maya. That's good. Using that afterwards, using the collarbone cue after the space between the shoulder blades. Yeah, I like that a lot. So quickly on the hands behind the back. I know, big staple in yoga to do this. Problematic. I mean, I can do it. Wide ribs, hands behind the back, shoulder blades wide. I'm keeping the ribs. I'm not letting the ribs come out. I'm actually keeping the ribs here. Working in here. You can see my shoulders are actually opening here. And I'm getting some opening through the chest. Yeah? Now, if you've got half of the people in your class that to take their hands behind their backs, they're like this. And even as you tell them shoulders back, they're here. This is not going to open them ever. If anything, this is going to further load the pattern of this internal movement of the shoulders. That's the only way that they could even come close to doing this. They don't have the opening to keep their arms externally rotated and grab. They're so turned in that the only way to get their hands to touch is to turn in more. And now they've got so much of a turn in that they don't have the ability, strength, or opening to ever get that. And that's when they're here. What do you think happens now if I fold forward and put more flexion into my upper back? Putting more flexion to my upper back is actually going to increase this internal rotation of the shoulders. So if we're looking to get an opening across the front of the shoulders here, and we're putting somebody in a position that's doing this to them just because they're trying to get into this shape, it's not going to get us the opening that we want. It's not going to get us the opening that we want. And unfortunately, I've tried to give this to people that can do it, and then give the people that are doing this something else to do. But human nature, they want to do the maximum pose. They want to do great. They don't want to do something that's not the final pose. So they're going to, fuck it, come here and do this. So just something to keep in mind when you're cueing that. Look at your class and seeing if it's getting the effect that you want it to get. Okay. Bjorn, cool, man. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm gonna get about another 15 minutes in here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the bandhas. Come back, you can watch the recording later. Okay. So let's get a little bit more into the last question we'll kind of work with for today, I think. Ooh, and it's a big one. It's a big one. So we'll talk about this one. I'll let you guys go. Confusing information about the bandhas and the core and all of those things. Yes, absolutely. So the way Christian asked it was, there's some confusing information out there about breath and bandhas and IAP, intra-abdominal pressure. How would you recommend a student start to dial in breath and movement? Should you suck your stomach in? Cool. I'll do this with the breath. I'll talk a little bit about sitting bones, and then I'll let you guys go, and we'll do this again in another week and a half. I'll see if I can do one in Maine on the day off. So yeah, we'll probably do one around maybe November 3rd or 4th. We can get another one in. So bandhas. Bandhas. My idea on bandhas is when they are taught, for the most part, we are teaching the same way that when we're teaching individual muscle engagements on their own, what it can do is it can disconnect the actual functional application of those muscles when we're trying to isolate them and use them or squeeze them or do something that's outside of their function as part of a moving system. That doesn't mean that we can't individually isolate some of these muscles. That can have a real big benefit as far as different way, but some of the Kinstretch stuff, some of the functional range conditioning stuff, as a small supplement to some of the other things, can be really good. If you guys don't know Kinstretch, it's a lot of joint activation and a lot of isolation, joint isolation, and trying to get just one joint to move disconnected from the rest of the body. In certain circumstances, for small parts, for small pieces, that can be a thing, but I would almost want to see less isolation in that, and focus on one joint movement, but becoming really curious about what that one joint movement does in the relationships, because no joint in the body moves in a healthy system without an effect on another joint or down the line of the system. It's just not the way that the body works. It's not meant to work. The body's not meant to work, everything else being static and just this one thing moves. The genius about the body and its integrity system is that everything moves. Everything is constantly adapting. If you do this with your finger, the pinky nail on your, the pinky toe on your other leg is already micro adjusting and balancing to maintain the tensegrity and the relationship to gravity and space. So if we overload a training system that's constantly looking for isolation in joint movements, there are going to be compensations and ramifications when we try to move the body as a whole system. But again, within certain reasons, especially when you're looking at something like injury recovery or reconnecting at the beginning the mind's awareness of a certain joint, it can be valuable there. But as far as either a main part or a big piece of training, that kind of isolation can have problems. And the pelvic floor and bandhas can be one of the biggest places, especially the way that yoga's been taught for so long, about that kind of isolation. And if you can think of something in the fitness world that's been kind of the same thing, is the way that core has been taught, which is, engage your core, squeeze your abs, like those kinds of things. Engage your bandhas, squeeze your pelvic floor, like these ideas of these little individual where they're not activating in movement, or they're not activating in relationship, but we're isolating them, we're squeezing them. What we're actually doing is we're restricting communication and the ability to move dynamically and to be able to sense and react to how much tension those places need, and we're just clamping down and squeezing on them. And there's a thing on the body, there's an idea that if you look at the body's total movement as being 100%, like 100% total movement, like the body's going to move 100% no matter what. And let's say you squeeze your abs to the point that your abs aren't moving normally. Let's say your abs were responsible for 10% of the movement, 10% of the movement in your body in whatever movement you're going to do, just as an example. So if all of a sudden you squeeze your abs so much that instead of being able to move your abs 10% of the whole movement system, now you're only able, your abs now, because you squeeze them and lock them down, your abs are only able to move 2% of the 10% that they're supposed to move. So now that other 8% that your abs are supposed to be able to move and they can't do, that 8% has to be taken up by another part of your body. That means that another part of your body is going to have to move an extra 8% to be able to compensate for the 8% that your abs can't move because you've locked them down. So now you've got someone that's a part of your body that's less mobile and stuck, that's being compensated by another part of your body that has had to become hypermobile in order to get the full 100% of movement. So that's not where you're going to get instability somewhere else. You're going to get restrictions in one place, hypermobility in somewhere else. Now the relationships are going to start to get a little bit messy, and that hypermobile area is going to start to grate. It's going to start to push in. It's going to start to bring other weird things in the full movement. So being able to engage just enough as part of the whole system matters. But how do we do that? So pelvic floor, bandhas, it's an important spot. It's an important part of movement, and so is intra-abdominal pressure, TVA activation, psoas engagement, being able to use the diaphragm well in concert so the whole system moves well. And not only that, but getting those tensions to work well top to bottom. So diaphragm here, TVA, the connection between these two, and the pelvic floor diaphragm to have that kind of bellows work well. So now your two pumps that can bring all this expansion, now they're working well and not just squeezing and squeezing. Could you imagine now if this is so squeezed because you've engaged your core and locked down your abs, and this is so squeezed because you're engaging the pelvic floor? You can't get the amount of expansion and dynamic give and take that you want to have. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. All right, guys, let me see what mine says. I found myself cueing people to lift the belly button up. Right, I found myself cueing people to lift the belly button up after cueing the rest of the body, which seems to engage that space a bit more naturally. That's close. That's close. I mean, we're constantly refining these things, but you're getting there. But here's the thing with the belly button: go lower than the belly button. Go lower than the belly button. I know it's not as easy. It's a little bit more clunky to cue. It's easier as far as word wise to say belly button, but actually we're aiming lower. We're aiming lower with the belly than the belly button. We're aiming lower. So what we're gonna want an expansion here and a draw in here. So we'll talk a little bit about. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this step by step. I want to get you guys out of here in the next 10 minutes and give you guys a lot to think about and play with. So here's what we're gonna do. So one more thing, like I know Maya has already been doing the sitting bones together. So the idea is this. So if you guys imagine sitting bones, it's a really cool way to cue. So if you take people back and feel their sitting bones, actually the real action, the real focal point of the action is going to be just above the sitting bones. But sitting bones seems to be a place where if you get people to say sitting bones, they're going to get to hug in really well. So if I can get them to bend their knees a little bit, hip creases back, and then I want them to bring their sitting bones towards each other. Imagine they can bring their sitting bones towards each other. What that's going to do is it's going to give a nice, does a couple things. First, it gives a nice boundary because if you can imagine the thigh bones and the sitting bones, if I start to close the back of my pelvis towards it, it's going to open the front of my pelvis and it's actually going to push my hips forward. So the idea is if you squeeze your sitting bones towards each other, you keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, it's actually going to be this tuck under feeling. So we're going to use the sitting bones towards each other. It also, the same way that we did the twist in the arm to get this more tensional relationship in the arm because we're putting a twist in the muscle fibers here to get that to fire a little bit more. The sitting bones towards each other have a similar effect because of the way that the muscles wrap around and some of the tensions wrap around. If you look at what psoas does and some of the other muscles, they actually snake around the head of the thigh bone. So we're drawing the sitting bones towards each other. There's going to be a little bit of a spin put into the head of the thigh bone, which actually puts a soft twist into the fibers there. And if you do that, now you've got a boundary here that if you keep the sitting bones together, it's going to prevent you from taking the butt too far back. So you've got two tensions at play. You've got the sitting bones towards each other that are going to give a boundary there, and then taking the tops of the thighs back. So you've got two tensions doing this to each other. And those tensions can play back and forth, but again, there's this sandwich of strength. So it's not just butt back or butt back without anything being held here, because as you take the butt back, you're going to feel the sitting bones, heads of the thigh bones widen out.
If you've got a hug into the sitting bones, it's going to have that boundary that as you come back, and the more that you come back, you're going to start to feel a tensional relationship wrap around the head of the come back. You're already going to start to feel some stuff happening in your low belly when you do that. Does that make some sense? I know that was a lot. You might have to like listen to that a few times before you get it. Yeah. Another thing that that does with the sitting bones and tops of the thighs back is you'll start to feel that something starts to happen at the floor of your pelvis. That hug in of the sitting bones with tops of the thighs back starts to engage some of the muscles of the pelvic floor and starts to bring them into a little bit more of an expansive tensional relationship. So now there's some tone there. Now there's some tone to the pelvic floor without having you squeeze anything, without having you squeeze individual muscles. I'm giving movements to do. I'm giving a functional thing that I want to happen. Hug sitting bones toward each other, take the tops of the thighs back, and play with those two relationships. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to feel this pelvic floor start to turn on in a functional way. Let's see what Maya said. Just came to me. Sitting bones in, and notice the space that is directly opposite that space in space that is directly opposite of that space from the hips. From here, pull up. That's closer. You felt it, right? I don't know if Maya, did you do it and you felt it? Or you're just thinking about it? Because that starts to happen. What Maya is saying is when the sitting bones comes toward each other and back, it's almost that space right above the hip flexors, right into this low belly area, that you're going to start to feel that space start to turn on without any real cueing of doing anything there. So now the relationship between the pelvic floor and the low belly starts to turn on without actually having to cue or squeeze anything as far as muscle engagement. Just movement. Just movement. Sitting bones towards each other, that's a movement cue. Do these two things. Bring these two things together, your body's going to figure out what needs to turn on. Tops of the thighs back. Again, that's a movement thing. Haven't asked them to squeeze anything yet. And that starts to bring the pelvic floor online, but in a more sensitive way. Good, Maya. I mean, like, not only are you thinking that's the right spot. That's the right spot. That's why I thought you had done it and felt it, because that's going to be the spot that you're going to start to feel it right away. And then we can add a little bit more to that. Here's an exercise that I want you guys to do to play with the pelvic floor. You can come back to this one. But one of the things that we can do, and it's a different way. So instead of using contractions, if we start to organize the movement more at the base of the pelvis. So if you can imagine having the legs a little bit far apart here, almost in our modified goddess pose, butt back a little bit, sitting bones towards each other. That's going to hold there. But what happens now if I'm going to maintain the boundary of sitting bones towards each other, but I'm going to slowly soften the boundary. So as I soften that boundary, they're going to start to spread. The pelvic floor is going to start to open and I come down a little bit. Now, instead of starting with the feet, what happens if now I let my legs be a little bit softer, even let my feet be a little bit softer, and start to draw the sitting bones towards each other and start to let that strength spiral down into the legs. And again, I can maintain the sitting bones and slowly butt back, slowly allow the tensions to soften a little bit as it spreads. And then here again, sitting bones come towards each other, and that does the gathering up. So it's not as if everything is happening in the pelvic floor, but it's where it's organized, and then the strength spirals out into the legs. And you can even do it from here. So I can take my weight more into my left heel, sitting bones towards each other, and that organizes here. Now I'm definitely more in my left butt, sitting bones towards each other like crazy, almost no weight on my right foot. Now to take this to the other side, I'm gonna take my butt back. I'm gonna start to let the sitting bones come apart, really soft, soften the legs, here. And then now I'm gonna start to gather in, right heel presses down, but sitting bones come back towards each other, spread. And then I'm gonna gather in again. So it's an organization that happens more in the pelvis. It's an organization that happens more in the pelvis, and the strength spirals out through the legs. I want you guys to play with that. Go slow, heel to heel, definitely weight in the heels, and play with that and see how much softness you can bring to the legs. And have the movement start from the pelvis and let the strength spiral out into the legs. Okay, so that's the pelvic floor part of the bandha. So let's take it up a little bit further to what we were saying. So once I set someone up, show it one more time, please. Yeah, no problem. So it's here. So the organization is going to be here. So I can even let my legs. It's going to seem funny, but the organization, sitting bones spread apart, and then sitting bones come together. And keeping the weight, I'm almost staying really soft here. If you see it from the side, sitting bones come towards each other. As I come back, I'm gonna let them spread apart. And then here, push through my right heel, and then sitting bones come towards each other. So it's an organization that's happening in the pelvis. As I draw the sitting bones towards each other, I come up, and then as I allow them to spread, it releases the tension. I get to go to the other side. So it's does that make a little bit of sense? I'll see if I can make a video specifically for that for you guys. I just give you that video with cues, and I'll put something else on that you can see it a little bit better, and I'll upload it for you guys. How are the feet and toes aligned here? Because I feel pain in my knees. Yeah. So what you need to do with your feet is allow them to move. Does that make a little bit more sense? So the relationship stays. I'm gonna make a video for you guys on this one because I don't have the right clothing equipment to get this to happen, but it's here. So even as I come back, notice the relationship. Butt goes way back. So all my weight is in the heels. There's nothing. Notice how nothing is pitching forward. So even as I come here and I open, see how the weight, my butt is still, there's still this pull back. So the sitting bones are pulling back. I'm not shifting forward where this tuck under is showing forward. I'm back here. And where in your knee, Maya? Is the pain on the front of the knee, on lateral? And once your knees align with your ankles, you stop. Once I can't maintain the tension, I stop. Once here, I'm pushing from my butt down into my heel, I've got maximum weight in this heel. I'm stopping there. Here. Now I've got maximum weight in the other heel. I'm stopping there. Does that make sense? If I go too far or too far forward, I'm looking to the same way that I was surfing the tensions this way. I'm surfing the tensions now back here. And it might be, especially at the beginning, it might be just here. Here. Very subtle. Pelvis opens. Pelvis hugs in. Pelvis opens back. Pelvis hugs in. Pelvis opens back. Pelvis hugs in. Lateral. Yeah. Make sure you're not going too much to the side. Make sure when you come here, you're not, the inner edge of your foot should not get light. Does that make sense? The inner edge of your foot should not get light. So when you come back here, the energy moves back, not out to the side. Energy moves back, and then right here. Now I'm right aligned, pushing straight down into inner and outer heel. I'm back. And then here, inner and outer heel. I'm not going so far where my knees coming out and I'm putting pressure on the outside. It's here. I think a little bit of sense. I'll send another video, Maya, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And you can send me a video of you doing it too. I want to see it, especially for Maya. Most of us, Maya especially because she's so strong, has such a strong practice that the over squeeze is something that's going to take a while to be like, okay, what's squeezing? What can I actually relax and still maintain the weight in the heel? But we'll work on it specifically. Yeah. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to show you guys before I let you guys go with me, do this with me. So bring your left fingers to the space below your belly button. Think low belly. And then take your right fingers, think to the very top of your abs. Now imagine the very top of your abs wrap all the way around circumferentially. So in the circle, they wrap all the way around from the front of your abs all the way around the circle to the very low rib on your back. Now what I want you to do is that I want you to draw the low belly in. Now don't think in and up, just think straight back, push in, and then with your top abs, I want you to push out at the same time. Now the top abs that you push out at the beginning, it's gonna be, you guys see that well? And then low belly in and wide. So think not just straight in, you want in, but more than in. Can you imagine you're spreading that space of your low belly as wide as you can? Take the butt back, low belly in and wide, but at the same time, push your top abs out. And then imagine that your top abs go all the way around. So you're not just pushing out here, you're pushing out here and here at the same time. Good. And then maintain that just enough so you can still breathe, but maintain some of that tension. I'm waiting for my thing to click back on. I lost it a little bit over here. So what we're trying to do, I'll keep talking until this thing pops back in. So what we're trying to do here, the diaphragm is not just the muscle of breath. It has a huge place in movement. And we talked about this idea of expansion. And we want this idea of expansion to be able to be more efficient with the rubber bands that are around our bodies. So if we're squeezing everything in, there's some muscle strength, there's some tensile strength in the muscles there, but it's also a much smaller place to be. We're using the diaphragm and we're squeezing in, we're actually restricting how much the diaphragm can expand us from the inside. And we're also restricting some of the dynamic ability of the ab muscles to work. And if we're asking the ab muscles to hold our posture and to hold us safe and decompressed, again, that 100% rule, we're taking away some of the movement that we're supposed to have here, which means somewhere else is going to have to become hypermobile, or other places are going to have to become hypermobile to combat that, to allow us to move well. So we want the abs to be more dynamic, and we want the core control, we want that inner core set, that stability of posture to be done at a much deeper layer. We want that to be transverse abdominis, we want that to be psoas, we want that to be diaphragm. We want that to be, the diaphragm is the bellows that can do this and can give us a little bit more expansion or a little less, but we want that pelvic floor, and let's actually be like this. So we want the diaphragm, and there we go. We want the diaphragm and the pelvic floor to be able to move together and work with the intra-abdominal pressure. How much do we need? Do we need more? Okay, got a little bit more for this handstand. Can release a little bit as we move, so we can constantly be playing with these tensions in these relationships, to be able to move from all of these different ways. So the way that the diaphragm is connected to the underside of the ribs, this part right here, if you can imagine that diaphragm, we want it to be able to expand the bottom of the ribs. A lot of the connections of the lines of the body, a lot of these rubber bands go in to the rib cage, go into like the center of our body. So if we're making this small, we're not able to get as much stretch and expansion as we want. We get the diaphragm to open the bottom of the rib cage, we get more of this expansive tension, but it's also going to be maintained and controlled from this transverse abdominis. And if you push out through the top abs, draw in through the low belly, and imagine you have these top abs that go all the way around and push those out just enough. You don't have to, at the beginning, you might have to overdo it to feel it, but after a while, it's just enough. Enough there to get that feeling here so you're not collapsing there. Or the other thing would be this a lot of times was Uddiyana Bandha, where people were just trying to bring their low bellies in, and this was it. It was disconnecting this part. You can see that there isn't that same kind of tensional relationship here as here. This is much more powerful, much more even throughout the whole system. Core is turned on here. This is different. You guys see the difference there? This is just drawing belly in and up, pulling the diaphragm in and up, using that instead of much more balance in the system, much deeper layers. My abdominals are still able to move, even though keeping that relationship. Let's see. I said one last thing. I use a cue a lot. I tell people standing to take their hip creases up, keeping knees soft, and then back while staying puffy in the ribs. I tell people in standing to take their hip creases up or back. To take their hip creases up, keeping the knees soft. Take their hip creases up. Then back while staying puffy in the ribs. I'm trying to figure out the cues. So keeping the knees soft, take the hip creases up like towards the ceiling, and back while maintaining puffy in the ribs. That can work, but I can see that they can do that and still have no real engagement in the TVA or diaphragm or any of this stuff here. I think I can do this action and still be a little bit disconnected and a little bit hyperlordotic. I'd have to play with that one more. Mike, if you can send me a video of what you're show me that cue. Show me that cue and I'll try it again. I'm not sure I get it. Like I have them use their fingers to pull their hip creases up and back. I'd have to see it. Like I like it as far as the shape. I'm not sure if it's automatically. I don't know if we've got the best chance of getting the muscles to fire there, but we might be able to refine that a little bit because it's interesting. It's interesting. I want to see it more because oh yeah, send me a vid. Send me a vid because it's interesting. It's an interesting idea. I think I like pieces of it. I want to play with it a little bit more. I want to see how to see maybe we can refine it to get it to get a little bit more of it to happen. Yeah. Cool, guys. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, there's a lot else. There's a lot else that we're doing, but I want your questions. I want to know what you guys are thinking. I think I gave you guys a lot to think about and discuss and ask me questions about. And please ask me questions. Look at this over again if you'd like. Let me know what you're thinking, what blew your mind, what you're all pissed off about, what you don't think is working at all. But yeah, hopefully this is going to be a constant thing. I want to do it at least every couple of weeks. So if we can manage to get it done in every couple of weeks, that'd be great. Also, like some of you guys are doing really good, and a lot of you guys are doing like really good stuff where you're at. So hopefully maybe the next one or the one after that, see if we can do it Skype also, so you guys can see each other and start to talk to each other, because you guys are, each one of you is a hugely valuable resource that has different ways of thinking about things and doing things, and it's cool to hear from different communities that you guys are working with, and the stuff that's working well, and the stuff that you're fighting, and we can kick it around and see what we think about it, and give you feedback, and you could be valuable giving us feedback on the other things. Um, but this is really cool, and what we're working on now, I'll give you guys more and more of an idea. Oh, send me pictures. Send me like a nice headshot, or like, it doesn't have to be a headshot, but a shot that I can see your face, so I can put it on the website, about teachers that are doing the things that we're doing. That's being built more. Got a lot of exciting stuff that's coming up as far as the videos that we're putting up and resources that we're putting up. Not only for you guys getting better at talking about what it is that we're doing, and our philosophy, so you guys can copy it, or at least have a better idea. And it's taken us a while to do this, because honestly it was one of those things that we knew, but talking about it was something different, and that's finally like starting to coalesce, and we're starting to talk about it in a very cool way. And even having this big umbrella of healthy movement that can be used in a physical therapy sense, in a bodywork sense, working with athletes and mobility, people that have no interest in yoga at all, um, and are just looking for healthier movement and happier lives, and having an umbrella of, this is the philosophy of our movement, and having something like Fluidus be under that big umbrella of movement, as this is the yoga that we teach based on this evolving movement philosophy. um, but it's exciting stuff. I won't keep you guys here for too much longer. I've had you guys here for 2 hours. um, but yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about some of the stuff that we're doing. I'll put some more stuff online. But ask guys, like, I am obsessed with helping you guys and giving you guys as many resources. Guys, get online, please. Please. It doesn't have to be, I don't care if it's perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Show what you're doing. What you're doing is important. The people that you're working with, show what you're doing. And if you do, tag me in it. I'll share your stuff. I love to do that. I love seeing when you guys put something up that you're working on. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be, hey, look at this new thing that I'm doing with the foot. Put like a 30-second video of it up. Send them to me, and I'll cut them up. If you want, it's like, look, I don't know how to put it up. I don't want to do anything with it, but here's a cool thing that I'm working on. If you give me permission, I'll cut it up. I'll put it up. Like, I'd love to do that for you guys too. All right. So, all right, guys. I love you guys. Thank you for coming on, and for spending part of your day, and a couple of hours of your day. Some of you guys are nighttime. Some of you guys like first thing in the morning. I really appreciate it. Please send me a text or a message after we get off here. Let me know what you think, what worked. Stay in the conversation with me. All right. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.